What's up, everybody? I've had Mass Effect Andromeda on my mind a lot lately, and it got to the point that I decided to replay the game. I don't really come back to Andromeda like the other games. The first reason is because most of the mods and other content that I cover for the channel is usually on the trilogy, but it's also because I don't really care for this game as much as its predecessors. I've never hated it, but didn't enjoy the game as much as the others. However, after playing through the game again after a few years, I've developed a somewhat different perspective on Andromeda. This game has always had its strengths, particularly in the combat system, and it did introduce some characters that become fan favorites in their own right. But for this video, I want to take it back to 2017 and encapsulate what turned a lot of fans off from this game, but also give my own perspective about Mass Effect Andromeda. Do you know one of the easiest ways to piss a video game fan off? Releasing a game that's unfinished. It was apparent that Mass Effect Andromeda released unfinished. The rise of online gaming came with its consequences. As games started to become larger and more detailed, developers started releasing games that were unpolished. It's easy to forget that games usually have strict deadlines, and most of the time publishers aren't going to bend on those deadlines, so they get rushed out. And then the companies will go back and release patches for them later. And Andromeda was one of the many casualties of that practice. This game went through some development hell. The main dev team for Andromeda, BioWare Montreal, was understaffed for most of the project. EA wanted BioWare to use the Frostbite engine, so they had to recreate all of the assets from scratch. Plus, there were multiple teams working on the project, and it caused some communication issues. There was no clear direction for this game for most of its development. And because of these problems, what we got was about 18 months of work out of a 5-year development cycle. And it's amazing the game released functional at all. But a big consequence of releasing the game before it's ready is that you don't catch all of the bugs that are still present in the game. These can be game breaking and a deal breaker for gamers, and this was one of Andromeda's biggest problems. According to fans, these bugs were bad when the game came out. You can still find montages of the bugs on YouTube. If I can remember, I got the game like a month after it was released, and I didn't experience a lot of bugs, but there was one that happened to me that made me have to reload the game. It happened when I was jumping to the forward station near Dralir on Kadara, and I just fell through the map, just out of nowhere. And like I said, I had to reload my save, and to this day, that's in the back of my mind whenever I travel to that spot. Also, while recording for this video, I stumbled upon another bug. The Remnant Architect still gets stuck in the air. I was trying to fight this thing for about a good 10 minutes before I just decided to load up an earlier save that wasn't in the area. The point is that while bugs can be funny, at the same time, they can be an annoyance, especially if they're game breaking. I know it may be impossible to remove all of the bugs from a game, but the egregious ones should have been addressed. Alongside the lack of support when it came to patches, this game never got any DLC. BioWare ceased single-player content development and support in August 2017. August 2017! The game came out in March that year. If I can recall, the only new things you could get through the game at the time is if you bought the deluxe or super deluxe editions of it, which I believe the super deluxe comes automatically with PC versions of the game. But this left a bad taste in some fans' mouths. It's like they just washed their hands of the game a few months after release and put all their eggs into working on Anthem. And while I've never played Anthem, I can remember that game not being well received as well, so in hindsight, was it really worth it? One of the critiques about Andromeda is that the story is weaker than the other games and that the characters are a bit lacking. I think part of the reason why the story gets critiqued is that the stakes aren't as high as the other games. It's still serious, but there's not an extinction level threat like the Reapers. Yeah, you have to fight the missing guards, and then there's the threat of exaltation that comes from the cat. You fight the Railcar for a while, and then there's the Remnant and the Mercs, but that's nothing new to the series. But all of that feels on a smaller scale compared to the Reaper threat. All in all, the goal of Andromeda is to find a home for everybody, get along with the locals so that makes settling easier, and sharpen the Archon and the cat, and I think that suffices. I did like there wasn't this mythical level threat, and that we're just trying to place roots in a brand new galaxy, but I do understand the point that it seems like something was lacking, and it makes sense because this game was rushed. As far as the characters, some of them can be a bit annoying. I think Foster Addison is the one that gets pointed out the most, and the dialogue can be a bit cheesy at times.
I think I really pissed that one off. Maybe because I shot him in the face.
But there are some characters that are enjoyable. Kesh has become one of my favorite side characters in the series. Krogan are just awesome in general. Strux and Spenders snake asses though, not so much, though that's by design. Now I will defend the Tempest crew because they're not bad. They just aren't as interesting as the Normandy crew as a whole. But the thing to keep in mind is that the Normandy crew got 3 games to develop and become the characters that we love and respect. The Tempest crew don't have that advantage, but they're still interesting in their own ways. I like PB, mainly because she is the polar opposite of Liara in terms of personality, and she does have that researching bone that Liara does, making her feel familiar at the same time. Vetra has that laid-back, cool demeanor to her, but she's also very protective of her sister. Drac is that grizzled old Krogan warrior. Cora, a human biotic who trained with Asari commandos. Liam is an ex-cop. He's probably the least interesting one. He's got a good heart, but he tends to bite off more than he can chew. And then there's Jaw, our Angaran liaison who's become a fan favorite. The Rokar storyline was great in my opinion, because there was emotional weight to it, with Jaw's old classmate Axul running the anti-alien faction, and with Jaw's family being involved later, I was invested. Suvi and Callow are good complementary characters. Suvi is unintentionally funny, and Callow is okay. I didn't mind him. Same with Gil and Lexi. Do y'all remember how Mass Effect 1 side worlds were? You had the main mission for that world, and outside of that, you had MacGuffins to collect or Thresher Moths to fight if the world had one. The worlds were mostly barren and mountainous landscapes. Absurdly mountainous landscapes for some of them. It could be a challenge to get to some of the entrance points because first you had to figure out how to traverse the terrain. These worlds were amazing at the time because ME1 came out earlier in the 7th generation, so this was considered a technical achievement. However, by today's standards, they are rather lacking, although some worlds are still gorgeous. Mass Effect Andromeda expands on the first game's explorative world formula by melding the loyalty and main missions into the worlds, while also giving you side quests to do. This was a good way to get players to explore the worlds, because sometimes it led to you naturally finding side quests anyway. However, the empty space problem was not fixed all the way. The problems start to come in after the major story missions are done. Now you gotta go out of your way to find the rest of them, which you might out of curiosity, but sometimes it's not worth it for how big these worlds can be. To me, the biggest culprits of this are Kadara and especially Eladin. However, BioWare did think about this. To shorten the length you have to travel to places, forward stations were developed to give you a checkpoint that you could always hop to, given that you're not in a fight at the moment, which was a good idea. However, you have to travel to that area that they're located at least once. But the point I'm getting at is that after your second and maybe third playthrough, you're probably going to skip some missions, unless you're just a completionist like that. Kadara is very mountainous, which makes some of the objectives hard to get to. And to be honest, the current valley near the top of the map could have used a forward station. This area is bigger than it looks. Eladin, though, is a completely different beast. I do not like Eladin in this northern sand desert. This part of the Sea of Ataraxia is nothing but tall sand dunes that slow you down. Most missions here are spaced out to hell, and worse, you have a metal death noodle, the remnant abyssal, digging through the dunes. This makes traveling up here nerve-wracking, because the thing is an insta-kill if it hits you, and even seeing it near you makes you hold your breath a bit. The good side is that it's not really focused on people, it's just doing its own thing. So if you did get hit, you were just extremely unlucky. H-47C is spacious too, but I don't find this one annoying because while you have missions here, it's outside the core 5 worlds, so there aren't as many missions. Plus it's fun driving on the destroyed planet because of the lack of an atmosphere. Vogue can be a bit of a pain because it's icy and it's mountainous as well. The southern part of the map is a bit spacious, but you do have the Tarva Uni outpost in the area, so it acts as a second forward station. I don't mind Eos too much, mainly because Padromo sits near the center of the map, so it doesn't feel like everything is that far away, and Havarl isn't too bad in terms of scope, no matter where you go really. Maybe Old Havarl because you can't use the Nomad. I think the biggest thing that Andromeda has going against it is that it had to follow a legendary trilogy. This was a brand new galaxy, new characters, new everything. And it seems like the expectations that Mass Effects 1 through 3 carried were cast onto this game, and many felt it didn't live up to those expectations. Ryder was never going to capture that same mystique that Commander Shepard had, and they shouldn't have been expected to. But that was just how the cookie crumbled. I think the next Andromeda game would have focused more on the Ket, similar to how Mass Effect 2 gave us a look into the Geth as a race. By focusing on the Geth, it gave us a reason to care more about them because we learned more about them and could sympathize with them. Now, I'm not sure how sympathetic the cat would have been, but at least we may have learned more about their overall goals. The Archon was basically doing his own thing after a while. What was the end game for the cat as a race as a whole? Was there some supreme leader of the cat who was leading this galactic conquest? We don't really know. The biggest consequence of the mixed reception for the game is that Ryder never got the chance to be expanded upon, the chance to see where their characters could have gone. We don't know what was going to happen next in the Cat War, and we're probably not getting that for a while, and that's kind of sad. However, if the next Mass Effect game does do well, it might open that back up. Who knows? Mass Effect Andromeda is a game that I've come to respect more as time has passed. The game has its flaws, oh yes it does. But I think when I get to the retrospective of this game, I might be a bit more forgiving. However, I do think this game personifies missed potential, and a lot of it wasn't BioWare's fault. But despite the development hell, BioWare did enough to create a decent game. The story is alright to me, the ending was satisfying, the main cast is interesting, we got a new species and a great character in Jaw. The main worlds, while sort of empty, look good for the most part, and I can't leave out the multiplayer mode and combat system. Multiplayer is pretty fun, and Andromeda may have the best combat system in the whole series. Although I'm on record saying that I don't like some of the melee animations, I think this is an area where they did cut corners. I believe if the team had an opportunity to enact their vision and more time to develop the game, things could have turned out differently. However, what we got is a flawed but interesting Mass Effect game. This game could have been so much more. So much more. But that's the end of the video, guys. What do you guys think about Mass Effect Andromeda? Do you like it? Dislike it? Do you think it's alright? What do y'all think went wrong with this game? Feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace!
DJ Sonic 3.